Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. This tutorial is by request. During Inktober, I did this little painting for the prompt Celestial, and I had a few people ask me if I would do a tutorial on this, so I decided sure, and I'm going to do it on a greeting card because then I could put the text "You're a star" or something like that and send it as a card. So what I use to get the star shape, and you could use clip art, you could use stencil. I have this stencil from Darkroom Door, and that's what I'm going to use. And I'm just going to kind of center it up on this greeting card. Now my greeting card is actually a little bit too small, but I'm just going to make it work because I don't really need two of these paintings. So using one as a, you know, doing it as a greeting card I think will work really well. And I'm just going to kind of make sure it's pretty even. And I'm just going to leave a little bit more space on the bottom for my text. And I'm just going to go right in here with a fine tip waterproof pen and trace my star. Might be easier to use the other part of the template actually. I'm not going to go right to the end. Because I'm going to have to make it a little bit shorter on the edge so my paint doesn't run off the side, because you are going to be getting this really wet. So you want to make sure that your design does not go off the edge of the paper. You could do this with any shape. I've seen people do this with like their state shape, like the shape of an outline of their state. I think Becca Hilburn from Natto Soup sells some of Louisiana where she does like a celestial. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I think I saw her do that. And it looks really cute. But you could do this in any shape. You could do it in the shape of like an owl. You could do it in the shape of anything that's got a really strong silhouette. You could do a heart. Really anything. Okay, so where we have those edges there, I'm just going to kind of connect them. I'm just going to try to make it look as, I don't know, as neat as possible, but I don't want the paint to go off the edge. Alright, so it's a good idea. It would be a good idea to heat set this, but since we're working with such dark colors, if the ink bleeds a little bit, I don't think it's the end of the world. And I'm going to try to clip this just so I get the edges. I don't want to have any buckling, so tape it down if you're worried that your paper might buckle. I did it in a sketch pad and I didn't have it taped or clipped or anything, and it was fine. So generally your watercolor paint is only going to go where the paper is wet, so you shouldn't have too much to worry about. Now the paints, you can use whatever watercolors you have. The paints I'm going to use are these Koh-i-Noor paints. As soon as I knew I wanted to do something celestial, I'm like, oh, these paints will be fun to use. This is the Inktober for Artists watercolor wheel. And there's a set from Koh-i-Noor that is like on black discs, but I don't think the paint is the same. This stuff is very, very inky, and this came from a shop out of Australia. So if you are in Australia, look up Inktober for Artists and you can find these. As far as the rest of the world, I really don't know. It seems like this set is really hard to find otherwise. And they have a bunch of different sets. This is the complete set, and I just made a little color wheel in each of these discs because otherwise it's impossible to tell what the colors are. That's how transparent and inky they are. You can't tell what the colors are for most of them. And I've also got some Dr. P.H. Martin bleed proof white gouache that I will be putting some in this little container here. I'm just going to use the end of a brush to scoop a little bit out because I don't want to contaminate my I just need a little bit. I don't want to contaminate my jar. I love that stuff. That's another thing I really recommend is the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White. It is probably the most opaque gouache product, and the nice thing is if you use it full strength or just dilute it a little bit with water, the colors below won't leach up, which is something that can happen a lot with like markers and certain pencils and inks and stuff. So I'm going to cap that off. It's also really thick, so it doesn't really want to spill on you, which is another thing I like. Okay, I'm going to use this brush because I just got this set of brushes and I'm kind of curious as to how they'll work. It's a set of travel brushes and it was like $25, but let me show you. Actually, we got 6 brushes and my Cheap Joe Pseudo Sable, I've kind of worn them down. I've been using them for years, and so I was like, well, I need another big one to replace the number 12. And I was curious with these quills. I thought they might be extra large because quill sizing is usually big, but these are just like your standard sizing. But anyway, I like travel brushes. So I'm going to start by wetting the star only, just inside the star. And just be as careful as you can because you're going to need this wet for the paint to flow, but you don't want to go outside the lines, because if you go outside the lines, then your star is not going to be neat, because the paint is only going to go where you have your water. And I would try to find your most transparent watercolors for this, because then you're going to have a really dark color, and you're going to have a nice contrast where we put the white in to kind of make the Milky Way type cosmos looking thing. Now this is one of these things where it's almost like less is more. The less you do, and the more you kind of let the watercolor do its thing, the better it's going to look. So, you know, you could do, you could make a bunch of these cards at once, because you're going to have a significant amount of drying time on these. So yeah, think of any shape that you could do. You could do like, you know, you could do a Christmas tree. You could do a glass of champagne for New Year's. That would be so cool in this effect. Anything where there's a really strong graphic outline that you can use and space to paint on the inside would work really well for this. That's why like a lot of states would work really well, because of the, if they're kind of like a big recognizable shape. All right, so now we want to get some colors in here, and I'm going to do some yellow first. I think I will grab this yellow here, and I'm just basically going to be recreating my star. So I'll give you a peek at that. Okay. I'm going to start that kind of over here in the bottom right hand side. So the key to this is not to make mud. So like if I was doing yellow right here, I'm not going to put purple right on top of that. I'm going to ease it over to purple. I think I might do a little bit of red or orange. Let's see what that looks like right over here. And try not to overmix. Let the paint or the ink, whatever you're using for your color, just kind of let it do its thing. It's going to mix plenty because we have such a wet surface there. I'm going to clean my brush off. I like these brushes. That's nice. I'm always on a search for cool, you know, for cool travel brushes, especially ones that aren't going to cost an arm and a leg. Now I'll do the pink next to the yellow, because if that mixes, it'll make an orange. And it won't make a mud, you know, it won't make brown. But then if I do blue next to it, or if I do purple next to it, it will look nice. Now here I've got a really heavy puddle. So when you have a really big puddle, that will actually kind of act as a barrier. It'll fight against your watercolor. So you want to just kind of dry your brush off and set it in your puddles to pull any of those puddles out. And also you don't want to over dilute your color, because you do need some pretty strong color in here. I can't remember exactly what colors I used the first time. So it'll be a little bit different. It's kind of impossible to recreate it perfectly. Going with some stronger color here. And remember, you don't want it to overblend. Any little like darker variations will look natural. Now I'm going to go with some purple. I think I'll use this really vibrant purple here. It's so important to swatch these guys, because anytime you can't tell what the medium is, it's a good idea to swatch it. Like pastels, I don't feel like those need to be swatched. They generally are like opaque, but like water-soluble media, such as like your Inktense pencils, or your Inktense blocks, or your watercolors, anything where it looks a lot different in the pan, it's a good idea to swatch it. And you're probably thinking, wow, that is so vibrant. It looks way more vibrant. Keep in mind, anytime you have like a watercolor or an ink, anything really wet like that, it is going to dull down as it dries. So you want to be prepared for that. This is a really interesting looking blue. It's almost like a violet blue. We'll get some of that in there. Think of your opposites. You don't want to have, like, I wouldn't want to have a blue over an orange, or right next to an orange, because then that will kind of smear and look brown if they mix. You don't have to use a brush that's quite this big, but you do want something that's going to hold some paint, because you do need to get a lot of paint down there. You don't have to rush, but you don't want to let it dry on you either. just take your time on those edges. Make sure your edges are nice and crisp. Also, check your brush for any little drips on the ferrule, any drops, because if those slide down and land in your, especially if they don't land exactly on the wet paper, if it lands like half on the wet paper, half on the dry paper, that's going to give you a kind of a mess. You can tip it to urge it to blend a little bit if you want to, if you don't think your colors are mixing quite enough, but generally I think they will mix pretty well on their own. Knowing how much water is one of those things that just comes with practice. You can have too much water and then the paint won't come off your brush if your paper's too wet. Then you can have, you know, too little water and not have anything moving as well. Now see how I'm getting a little bit of brown right there? We'll remedy that. It's not that big of a deal, but I'll clean my brush off because I'm going to be getting into that yellowy area. And the more transparent your colors, the less likely you are to get mud, which is another reason I like to use these really inky colors. I'm just going to kind of lift in here, just kind of lift up that brown that I'm seeing. So I cleaned my brush off, I dried it, and I'm just clean, dry, go in there and lift it up. Now, I want a little bit more dark over there, so I'm going to go into that dark blue. It's also drying on me there. Now, we're going to do a couple techniques here. And I have the heat on in my studio, so I'm actually getting, this is drying faster than I want it to. I was going to do salt on this. Actually, I'm not going to do salt. You could do salt if your paper is still like super wet. You could do salt on there. I don't think that's really going to show for me, so I'm going to skip it. But go ahead and do that if you like. What I am going to do, though, and I think I'll switch to a smaller brush so it doesn't grab quite so much water. I am going to mix some water here with my gouache so it's fluid. And I am going to kind of go in and start adding my lighter, cloudier bits of Cosmos here. I'm going to lift out a little bit of the orange that has dripped in there. No two are going to be alike. That's it. That's the other thing to keep in mind. They're all going to be a little bit different. So don't try to make it exactly. It's kind of almost like doing the Petri resin technique. Oh, I just got a drop of water on there. It's kind of like doing that Petri dish resin, because the heavier, more opaque Dr. P.H. Martin's here is going to want to just kind of sit and almost look like a jellyfish in the over the ink. I'm going to clean my brush off. I'm going to make sure I don't get contamination. And you're going to have to be patient. You're going to have to let this, you're going to have to let it dry. Oh shoot, there, just what I told you, just like what I warned you about. I had a big drop of water on my brush, and it dropped and it went half on my paper and half off. So that's exactly what I don't want to happen for you. So wipe that whole length of the brush just to be safe. I'm going to get a little bit more of the bleed proof white. My brush is clean, so add a little bit of water to it. You want to do this while it's wet so that you get that little bit of a blend. Give a little bit of color mix. Oops, getting a little too muddy there. And the paper you use can play a part as to the effect that you get. I'm kind of thinking I want to do one more little layer of white. Maybe I will add salt on this because it's still wet. Thinking I want a little bit more white kind of in there too. I don't think these quills are the best ones to add on with just because there's so much, you can have surprise water where you don't expect it. All right, let's just sprinkle a little bit of salt on there, and then we're going to let it dry fully, and just try not to disturb it when it's drying. Like, put it in another room and walk away, honestly, because it'd be very tempting. I'm using kosher salt because I feel like sometimes it will give me a little bit better of effect, but any salt should work. I'm not sure if it's going to work too well on this because I've waited a little bit too long and it's started to dry on me, but it'll give us a little bit of texture, and that's really what we're after there. And we're going to let this dry, and we'll be back in a few minutes and finish it up. All right, this has completely dried. It's nice and flat too, so that's nice. So what I'm going to do now is scrape off the salt. I'm going to be careful not to, like, hopefully not to smear the background, because it's, you know, it won't look as nice if we give it all smeary on the background. Let's see what sort of texture we got from the salt. I'm going to dump this into my trash can. All right, we did get a little bit of a salt texture there. That's kind of pretty. All right, that looks pretty good. Can you kind of see the texture that we've got in there? Sometimes it's hard to tell if you've got all the salt. You kind of have to feel it with your fingers. But I think that's all right. And if you did get anything in the background, you can take a white pen and clean it up. So when I did this one, I actually used the bleed proof white to add in those stars, but I noticed it cracked on my paper. This you don't want to put it, and just like any gouache, you don't want to put it on too thickly. So instead of using that, this time I'm going to use a white paint pen, especially because if you are going to mail this and it goes through the mail machines and it's getting like you know, getting bent through the mail machines, then, you know, you wouldn't want, that would crack even more. That's just in my sketchbook and it cracked, so I'm just dabbing on this acrylic paint pen. Acrylic is a little bit more, is quite a bit more durable. Actually thinking I would like this to be a little bit more yellow down here, so I think I'm going to add a little bit of that watercolor yellow with a brush. I'll show you what I mean. Let me just get as much acrylic as I want in there. Then I'm going to take, I think we used that yellow there, or maybe it was that yellow. I'm not sure. Maybe it was that one. That one looks nice. And let's just take a little brush. This is one of my mixed media brushes for acrylic anyway, so I know it's not going to hurt it. I don't want to use my watercolor brushes on with acrylic paint pens because they could damage them. So a rule of thumb is to keep your brushes with the medium, with one medium. Now you can kind of downgrade, like I could take my gouache brushes and use them with watercolor. It's not going to hurt them, but using my watercolor brushes with like acrylics would hurt them. I hope that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe that doesn't make sense. I just feel like it needs a little bit more yellow in there. So don't be afraid to layer it up. I mean, It's good if you can do more with that first layer. Maybe I will go in and get a little bit of that bleed proof white. Just not put it on too thick. Look up in there. You can overlap, but I just don't want it to mix in and get all muddy. I'm adding a little bit more of that bleed proof white because I'm not using it really thick, so I'm not worried about that cracking. Just want to build that kind of starscape. Maybe add a little bit. I don't mind it mixing with a color underneath. Yeah, the pen was just a little too bold. The gouache will mix. Well, actually, it's bleed proof, so it might not mix. It shouldn't mix with the color underneath, but I like the salt effect, so I don't want to cover up everything. But sometimes you just want to pull in some of those other colors. Oh, bead of water there. We don't want that on our project. And everyone's going to be a little bit different. Just keep that in mind. They're all going to be unique. Grabbing some kind of like a, almost like a naphthalene crimson color. Woo, that's bright. I just felt like it needed a little bit of that pop. And a lot of this stuff is just kind of going by your own gut and like, what do you feel like it needs? What color do you think belongs there? And just kind of adding it in, pouncing it in, leaving the parts you like alone, then adding some other parts that, where you think you want a little more interest. Yes, I just wiped my, I don't know if you saw that. I don't know if that showed up on camera. I just wiped my brush on my sleeve. Oh, you can't take me anywhere. All right, we want to dry this, and then we'll go in with a pen for some final little highlights. I like the colors on this one more, I think, actually. Just a little bit different, but that's all right. You can, like, there are areas that are still dry that we could start off by putting our pen work on, but it's nice if you can get the whole thing dry before you begin. And I'm just going to use a gel pen for this because my paint pen is going to be a little too bold, I think. I might go back in with a little bit more paint pen in the center. I just don't want to have a cracking situation. And actually, I can see a little bit of cracking there. Maybe it was the paint pen that cracked. Okay, so I got my Uniball Signo. This is my preferred. Sometimes I need to get started. My preferred paint pen. And do kind of like a random smattering of stars. I say just go for what you think looks good. Now if you do have like that, like I said, if you have a little bit of extra, if you get a messy edge, you can fix it with your paint pen as well. And I think that's just about done. Which colorway do you like the look of better? I feel like it needs a little bit more bright in the center and where it's all concentrated. If it looks too polka dotty, just kind of tap it with your fingers. Just kind of like bounce like that. Wow, it's already dry. A little bit of tapping, a little bit of bouncing. That will also keep the it'll keep the layer of paint a little bit on the lighter side. And then if you want to do some little like tiny taps around the edge of that with the gel pen, I think that looks nice. There! I think that looks super cute. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you give it a try, let me know. You can always tag me at Lindsay Weirich on Instagram. And if you have any questions about this, let me know in the comments down below, and let me know which one did you like better, the one in the sketchbook that's kind of got the duller colors, or the one on the card that's got the brighter colors. Plus, I think a greeting card, you know, nice, bright, poppy colors, happy birthday, you're a star, good luck, whatever. You know, whatever you want to send to a friend. Friends love that sort of stuff. Thanks for watching, friend, and we'll see you next time. Happy crafting. Bye.